Yeah, hi everybody, and welcome to Ireland, the most indebted nation in the Western world, probably in the world. It's Monday afternoon, and the 31st of August, and I'd like to talk about two things. One, a very brief thing, which I'll do at the end, and basically what I'd like to say is I was out with my wife on Friday evening. I went to a social gathering. We had a meeting and a couple of drinks with some friends. It was very revealing. We had a brief conversation. I didn't want to make it very heavy about the whole situation that we found ourselves in now and the whole present debacle we find ourselves in the country. But I thought it was very revealing because the majority of these people were middle class people, and it gave me a great insight how confused and how I wouldn't say misguided, but certainly they're confused and their thinking is very muddled on the whole situation we find ourselves in. And I don't want to sound condescending or anything, but I think there were about 18 people there, 16 people there, and I'm sure it's a reflection of the bulk of people that would be in society. Some of the people blame the banks, some of the people blame the builders and the property developers, and only one or two blame the government, which I find extraordinary. So that's what I want to do today, just very briefly. I just want to touch on the three elements that make up this debacle that we're in, and that's the banks, the property developers, and the government. Deal with them just in turn very quickly. The banks are a key element within the capitalist system. What happens is Irish banks over the last, our indebtedness has grown from, as we've talked before, 11 billion in 1990 until it is today 1,700 billion, and that means that our banks borrowed a huge amount of that. They borrowed 1.3 trillion of that from outside of this country, because the indebtedness we have is national indebtedness from people outside this country and institutions outside this country. So the banks borrowed this vast sum of money and they loaned it to people inside Ireland. But all I want to say is that is what banks are supposed to do. That is what they do. Banks loan money to people. Let's move on now to property developers. And all I'd say is about property developers is that property developers really don't add any great value to society as a whole. These property developers borrowed the money which our banks had borrowed in turn from American and big world banks, and they did all sorts of things with it. They spent it, some of it here in Ireland, and lots of it outside of this country, in other countries all around the world, doing property developments. And the property development creed is only based on one thing: the Gordon Gekko principle. Greed is good. They're at the top of the triangle, of the capitalist triangle. They're at the very top. They're at the epicenter of the top of the triangle. And they work on one creed only. Their creed. It's centered around what's good for them. And that's at the core of capitalist society. The banks operate off the same principle. And the property developers operate off the same again. And that's what property developers do. Property developers borrow money and buy either greenfield sites or sites that have already been developed, knock the buildings down on them if they're old buildings, and redevelop new ones. And that's what they do. But in a real sense, they don't make actively any contribution to the well-being of society. The contribution they make is to themselves and their corporation and their companies. Now, let's move on to the government. What happens in government is as follows. sovereignty of the state rests with us, the people. We loan that sovereignty to individuals who make up political parties. And if one of the parties is elected into governmental power, they elect a group of people called a cabinet, and in turn one of them goes forward as the Taoiseach to lead our country. And we imbue in them the sovereignty that we have through the democratic principle. So that is loaned to them, it's transferred to them every 5 years. And we did that 3 times with a man called Bartholomew Ahern. And either we were in denial, we either didn't want to believe it, or we knew that it was going on and we just cast it out of our mind. He was in bed with the property developers. He went to bed with the property developers. He's supposed to be our leader, our Taoiseach, the leader of this country, for one purpose only, for the benefit of our nation. He doesn't understand that. He knows nothing about public service. There's a pendulum at work, and it's called private gain at one end and public service at the other, and it swings that way with Fianna Fáil. It always swings that way with Fianna Fáil. Private gain. You've only got to go back through the last 3 of their Taoiseachs. Bertie Ahern, Albert Reynolds, who was only able to sack his cabinet, individual members of his cabinet, because they were blackmailing him, and 3, Charles J. Haughey, the most corrupt of them all. And yet the people of Ireland still keep electing these men, still keep electing. It's like they have a death wish. And now we see what they've taken, this government. Because the bottom line about it is, to get back to the three principles at work here, the first 2 principles, they did exactly what they were supposed to do. The banks are supposed to loan out the money. That's what they do. That's what banks do. For gain for the banks, for the shareholders. Next, the builders and the property developers. They're only in it for themselves, and we know that. They didn't make any. They didn't say we're in it for you. We want to give the money away to charity. The profit element that we make away to charity. No. They were very clear about it. There are key elements within the capitalist system. We have a government that is supposed to monitor what is going on in our country. That's supposed to legislate and monitor what happens. Supposedly, when they are in power, they are supposed to represent our interests. But they pissed our interests up against the wall. They're only interested in one thing: what went into their back pockets, and what builder they could sleep with the next night to get more and more money. And by sleeping, I mean the metaphorical sleeping. You know what I mean? When you sleep with dogs, you can come up with fleas. That's what happened to them. They got corrupted. They weren't happy enough with their 3 or 4 or 5 grand a week that they earn. No. They want to earn 20 grand a week, 30 grand a week. And in the time that Ahern was our Taoiseach, Bartholomew Ahern was our Taoiseach, from 1997 up until a year and a bit ago, our national indebtedness went from, we told it a lot of times before, 11 billion euros up to 1,700 billion. And our productive capacity decreased from 43% to, I think it's around 26% now. We will never be able to pay this indebtedness off. We are truly a basket case. And it's not down to banks, it's not down to builders and property speculators. They only did what they were supposed to do. That's what they do. We elected government to monitor what they do. And that government failed disastrously. And the main man for 6.5, 7 of those years is the man, the obese Taoiseach we have now running our country, Brian Cohen. Anyway, we'll come back to this at another time.